And I'm gonna be covering my experience as a Southern Black girl turned Black woman with the Diaspora Wars. Oh my gosh, I cannot pronounce that word. Is it Diaspora?
Diaspora.
You know what I'm trying to say? So I was born in 1999. I went to a predominantly Black elementary school. It was honestly just like a HBCU, but for elementary students. So if you weren't Black, it was pretty noticeable. So we had one white girl that went there, and we all knew who she was. All of our teachers were Black. All the administration was Black. They were mostly female as well. We only had one Black teacher that was a man, and we had one Black assistant principal. We had maybe 3 Hispanics in the whole school. This is from kindergarten to 6th grade. And there was a few people that were African as well, but I'll talk about how I understood the African culture. And by the way, I do know that there's more than one country in Africa. Like, I know Africa is a continent with many different countries, by the way. In elementary school, like I said, it was predominantly Black, and it was predominantly Black American. So was my neighborhood, to be honest. So I really had no real idea about any other cultures. I remember in the 2nd grade, I had asked myself, how will I ever tell the difference between a white person, a Hispanic person, and an Asian person? And I said, well, you know what? I can tell what Asians are because I see them at the beauty supply and at the nail shops. That's how it is regionally in this area. And here in Houston, Texas, in the region that I live in, and pretty much all over the city, even if the neighborhood is predominantly Black, like, the beauty supplies are Asian owned, and so are the nail salons. So I said, you know what, I can tell Asians because of their features, the white skin, the eyes, and the Black hair. So I said, okay, well, I can tell what Asians are, but how can I tell the difference between white people and Hispanic people? And I said, well, I can't. I really couldn't. And I made the distinguishing factor, well, white people have blonde hair and Hispanic people have brown hair. But this is my mindset in elementary school. I really couldn't tell, and I really had no way of telling. You know, I grew up around all Black people, and I went to school with all Black people besides maybe 5 people in the entire school. So with that being said, I never had an issue with crushes. You know, I was pretty much always chosen. Like, I was always chosen. Like, there was no hierarchy. Even with skin tones, there was no hierarchy of skin tones in elementary school. I will say that I did witness the effects of colorism. So there was the burnt biscuit comments, there was the lights go off and everybody says, oh, I can't see so and so comments. There was definitely that, but there was no light brown skin. Was not a thing when I was in elementary school, at least not where I was. So even light skin, like, we didn't even have that conversation about light skin. There was no preference. We were all just Black kids, and we all liked everybody. Moving to middle school, I went to a really diverse middle school, and that was kind of like a culture shock. You know, like, I'm going from a predominantly Black middle school to a majority white middle school, but there's also a very high population of other ethnicities, there's and races. Every race you can think of, every mix you can think of, it was at that school. That's where I learned that mix doesn't mean Black and something else. Mix can be white and Asian, mix can be white and Hispanic, like, you know, white and Indian. There can be different mixes. That was kind of my first time learning about that. Also, it was my first time really understanding the difference between Black Americans and Africans. The way I understood African, and this is such a fault in American society, and it's so intentional, the way they promote, not even promote, the way that they portray Africa in America. They portray Africa, and this is why I think that we should be more understanding towards Black Americans that maybe make not the best comments, because they portray Africa as one country intentionally. Everything that I knew about Africa before I went to 7th grade, before I was 13 years old, was that there were babies with pot bellies. They needed food, they needed water, donations. That's all I knew. I didn't know that there were different countries. I didn't know that it was a, I did know it was a continent, but I also thought it was just a country. So when I got to middle school, my best friend was Nigerian. Shout out to her. We were really close, and I learned a lot about Nigerian culture from her. One of my really good friends was from Sierra Leone, and I learned a lot of things about her as well, and a lot about Sierra Leonean culture. And you know, I got to try different foods and different things. I was really good friends with a girl who was Mediterranean. I forgot where she was from, but I tried a lot of her food. She always packed her own lunches, and it was just a very good cultural mix. So I definitely learned a lot about different cultures and people. But the thing I want to note here, because I'm going to talk about the diaspora and how how I interacted in it as a Black American, knowing that Africa is not one country. Also, that the way that they portray Europe, though it is almost kind of the, well, yeah, almost the same thing, because Europe, I did think Europe was one country as well. When I got to middle school, majority of the teachers were white, and we learned so much about Europe. We did not focus on Africa at all. Luckily, I was in the population of Black kids at my middle school. Though they may have been African, not necessarily Black Americans, that we interacted as Black Americans, if that makes sense. So I went to high school. Though it was majority Hispanic, it was like maybe 54% Hispanic and maybe like 42% Black. The Black presence was just so prominent. You know how we are, like, and I was really happy about it. Like, I really enjoyed going to a really diverse middle school, but that was the first time I kind of encountered racism too. Like, but I want to focus more on Black cultures and how Black cultures interact in America from my perspective. So I'll talk about that in a different video. But when I got to high school, I was very excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's more Black people. Like, it's gonna be more like my elementary. I was so wrong. Though there was a huge Black population, I still hadn't really understood that the way that the African community may interact is a little bit different than the way the Black American community may interact. So my first time note, like really understanding that, was I was on the dance team. My freshman year, I was on the JV team, and we had a class. And when I walked in, they were so excited to see me. Like, all the Black kids, they were like, oh my gosh, you know, she's new, I never seen you before, what's your name? I'm like, oh, my name is Sydney. Oh, where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from here. They were, are you African? I'm like, no. And they were like really offended. Prior to that moment, I've never seen anyone be offended by me saying no in that way. Like, usually if you ask a Black person, are you African, they would say no, like, from where I'm from. But they were like really offended. I'm like, well, are y'all African? And they were, yeah, and they were really proud. So that was my first time seeing people be proud to be African, and I kind of really liked that. I'm like, wow, like, I like that. I didn't understand that I'm American. I just understood that I was Black. Maybe I associate that with not really having a culture. Like, I kind of associate that with just, I'm a Black person in America, not that I'm American or Black American culture. I joined a club called ASA. That is the African Student Association, because I really liked how proud that the African community was at my high school. Like, And I learned that there are different types of Africans. Oh, I learned that in middle school because my friends were from different places. It was just like a huge sense of pride. I'm like, I love that. Like, I want to know more about where I come from. Like, I want to know more about my ancestors. Like, yes, I read that, you know, the Atlantic slave trade, black people were brought over from Africa. I want to learn more about like where I come from, and I felt like I could really do that by kind of just diving into the culture. And I did that through joining the club, you know, and kind of just asking people like, where are you from? Like, I had never asked anyone where they're from. I just kind of always assumed that they were Black American, just like me. So when I joined the team, that was my first taste of discrimination. So I had joined the team. It was like kind of very exclusive. It was very small at that time. It was maybe like 15 of us on the dance team, at least. The whole club was very big, but on the dance team it was maybe like 12 or 15 of us. We practiced in the sponsor's classroom. So she was always very sweet to me. The teacher that was over ASA, she was always very sweet to me. She was happy that I was joining and I was wanting to learn more, and that I wasn't, you know, I guess just being like the stereotypical person who's ignorant and just like, I'm not really fucking with it, whatever. And she was very welcoming to me, and I really liked that. You know, I felt a sense of community, and I felt like, oh my gosh, like, I like it. My mom came to my first meeting and she was like, yes, I like it too. And we were just really like comfortable with the whole thing, and like I was diving into it. So I think in my second practice, I noticed that the head captain and some of the other dancers were staring at me while I was learning the dance from like 2 other girls. I was always on the dance team. I was on a dance team in elementary. It was literally like, it was like so much like high school, or no, it was really like college. Like, we were a hip-hop dance team. You know, I thought I could really dance, you know. Well, I couldn't really dance. Then I joined majorette, so I always had that background, and I just thought like, you know, since I have this background, this will be pretty easy for me. You know, I just gotta learn the routine. But apparently I was not doing it right. I was not doing it right, because I would notice them like kind of staring. I'm just thinking, okay, maybe she's just a little bit skeptical. They stopped the music while I was learning it, and she was like, she shouldn't be here, like she's not African. And I was just like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean I shouldn't be here because I'm not African? Because though I understood that maybe Africans are a little bit different from Black Americans, I just always kind of was like, well, we're all Black. And they kind of made that like, no, we don't like what your culture associates with. And that's when I first learned that like, oh, so we are not the same. You don't like me. The more they were kind of explaining why they didn't want me on the team, why they didn't care for me, it kind of sounded like some of the things that I was learning from elementary school during Black History Month. Like, the same reasons why white people didn't like us. I'm like, well, this is kind of racist. So I was like, you know what, maybe they're right. I just shouldn't be infringing on their culture. So I went to the head coach and I was like, you know what, I can't do this. Like, she's right, I'm not African, so I don't want to misrepresent the culture. I don't want to go out and embarrass myself, because we were preparing for competition. So I don't want to go out and just embarrass myself, because you can kind of tell that I'm not dancing right, or I'm not, you know, I don't know the traditional moves, I don't know how to dance culturally. She was like, no, it shouldn't be like that. And I was like, okay, she was welcoming, but they don't want me on the team. So the girl, and she ended up coming to apologize to me, but then that's when I just kind of, it always stuck with me, like, well, you didn't really want me here. I did dance in the competition, but I did end up quitting the team, because I'm just like, well, my presence is really not wanted, and I feel it, and even though you're being nice to me now, like you've already kind of said how you feel. I just left and I ended up joining the cheer team, but I did become friends with many Africans at my school. It was mostly Nigerians at my school, but they would always kind of say things like akata, and if we got into talk about race and culture, then I would kind of understand, like, you don't really like Black Americans, like you don't really like me, like you may like me but you don't like my culture, and that kind of hurt because I like your culture. But it just kind of became like a little bit obvious that the African population, well, that the African community really sees a difference in Black Americans, and they see us as a little bit lower. At least that was my experience, because I need to talk about the Black Hispanic aspect of this as well, because I was really good friends with the Black Hispanic and teammates on the cheer team, and she and I were pretty alike, except we were just like the light and dark skin version. So we both had natural hair. She wore hers out a lot more. I wore mine a lot, but I also wore like sew-ins, braids, and things of that nature. We were both pretty thick. She was a little bit thicker than me, but you would look at her and think she's just a light-skinned Black girl. And that's what a lot of us thought, like, oh, she's just a light-skinned, you know, Black girl, whatever. But she was actually Venezuelan. She was just Afro-Latina. And it would always bother me because me and her were so close when she would say, like, we'd be talking or whatever, and she would say things like, I'm not like y'all, meaning Black people. And I'm like, bitch, what? Who you talking to? Because there is no y'all. Like, you're Black too. Like, which she is Black too, and I'm just like, I just kept wanting to say, like, are you mixed or something? Like, is that why you're saying that? Pro-Black has always been instilled in me. I've never felt less than anybody, besides what the mainstream media has wanted it to make me feel, especially with the whole foreign thing, which we'll talk about that in a different video. But I've never felt inferior to any skin complexion, anything, you know. I've always felt like I was the cream of the crop. I was always, you know, I never struggled to get chosen or anything, and I'm so grateful for that experience, because so many Black people in general from all cultures do not feel that way. So 2020, 2021, and this is like when I really noticed like how serious and repetitive and prominent these diaspora wars are. Like, I did understand, because I did witness this in elementary. The comments of the African booty scratcher, the comments of Ebola. Ebola broke out in 2008 or something like that. It was around the time I was in elementary school, maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, and it was kind of similar to how they introduced COVID to us. Like, COVID is the Chinese virus, Ebola is the African virus, and mind you, they promoted Africa as a country. So any African that we seen, you got the Ebola, you brought the Ebola. It was a lot of xenophobia, and though we didn't realize how hurtful that was, it was really hurtful. Like, as you get older, you see the effects of that, and I think that that is where the disconnect is, because it's kind of like, well, yes, I understand, but can you really hold people accountable? At least in my case, that were like 10 or 11 years old, but we're now 20 and 21. It's been 10 years now. We understand that. I mean, yes, like, let us know, because I had no idea before it was brought to my attention that that was that hurtful. Look at it from the perspective of Black Americans and how we handle white people and interact with white people. The majority of us are still kind of like, well, slavery wasn't that long ago. Segregation wasn't that long ago. Jim Crow was not that long ago. Like, my grandparents went through the Jim Crow era. We are still holding white people's feet to the fire, even though they weren't the ones who may have perpetuated that. You still need to pay for it, because we went through that, and it's passed down generational trauma. And that is not even generational trauma. That is like, I can pinpoint the person who said I was African booty scratcher, or I was the cause of Ebola, or I was whatever comment was made. I can still pinpoint that person, and they weren't the only person, so I can definitely understand that. And it really is sad because there's such a disconnect when there really shouldn't be. I feel like as we get older, I'm gonna just speak from my own perspective, as I've gotten older, I've been able to accept what people are saying that hurt them, and you know what, that was wrong. I'm able to want to go into different cultural spaces and be like, well, you know what, I like this. And I have actively sought out different Black cultural spaces just to learn, though I don't feel like they are as accepting of Black American culture because of how it's promoted. Things are promoted a certain way on purpose. Black American culture is not just what you see in the media and what you hear in the music, what you see on the TV. Like, it's how we interact too. Like, most of us are pretty normal, good people, you know. The same way that other cultures may think that Black Americans are just ratchet and, you know, we don't appreciate education, we don't appreciate certain things, we just perpetuate a certain lifestyle. Guys, that's the same way that a lot of us were raised to think about other Black cultures by the media, propaganda, all that stuff. So please just be patient and understanding and educate without looking down or, you know, anything, because people are willing to learn. I'm willing to learn. A lot more people are willing to learn. And yeah, so this was my experience with Black cultures, but here in America, here in Texas, from a Black girl to a Black woman. Please comment down below, let me know what you think and your experience, and I'll see y'all later.